In a Facebook post today, Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong reassured Singaporeans that the government will work with foreign workers, especially those living in the dormitories, to see through this difficult period. This comes as dorms continue to make up the huge majority of new COVID-19 cases. A record 447 new cases were confirmed yesterday, with 404 being work permit holders residing in dorms. There are now a total of 3,699 cases in Singapore and at least 1,800 people linked to dormitories who have tested positive for the virus. Nearly all existing dormitory clusters saw new cases yesterday, with 3 new clusters identified at other dormitories. A 4th cluster not at a dorm was also announced. It's a building of shophouses at 234 Balestier Road and is linked to foreign workers. Meanwhile, another foreign worker dormitory, Mandai Lodge 1 in Mandai Road, has been placed under isolation. There are now 9 dormitories declared as isolation areas where workers staying there must be quarantined in their rooms for 14 days. Here to talk about the situation in the dorms is Associate Professor Alex Cook from the Swee Hock School of Public Health at the National University of Singapore. So, Prof, the living conditions in the dormitories has been a talking point. Several migrant workers have been moved to the Singapore Expo and factory-converted dorms, but most remain in the existing dorms. Would this do more harm than good?
I think possibly. So, viral diseases spread quite easily within closed or semi-closed environments, such as dorms or schools and so on. And so I think that one of the things that is of quite big urgency just now is really to try to depopulate the dorms as much as possible to reduce the density within the living environments there.
How is that possible to reduce the density?
But effectively, we need to find somewhere else for many of the workers to be. I mean, you mentioned that some of them have been moved out to Expo or to other places. I think that there's a kind of a national urgency to trying to find somewhere that we can put 250,000 people.
Right. Well, Prof, so far 17 out of the 43 purpose-built dormitories have been classified as virus clusters. What are you expecting will happen in the coming days in terms of the number of cases originating from the dorms?
Well, I mean, so far we've seen really quite rapid exponential growth within the dorms. The number of cases have been doubling more or less every 2 days. And I think that that's something that we can realistically expect to continue to happen over the next few days, at least, even if we were able to move everyone out and get them into some other isolated facilities to stop transmission between the workers. I don't know how realistic that is, though, and so I think that there's a very real possibility that we'll continue to see exponential growth, perhaps at a slower rate, but still it is quite feasible that by the end of April we could be looking at 10 to 20,000 infections amongst our migrant workers.
Wow. Well, with the benefit of hindsight, were there any warning signs that the virus would have exploded within our migrant worker population? Could it have been avoided?
I mean, in hindsight, it's always easy to say that, oh, why didn't we think about the migrants getting infected? I don't know what we could have really done to try to prevent it, because a lot of the issues that we're seeing are structural issues, whereby if they were living in regular housing flats like you or I live in, then of course then there's much less ability for the virus to transmit from person to person, because you're actually able to isolate yourself from other people within the same building, or you're able to do social distancing. It's not clear to me how it's possible for our migrant workers to social distance themselves in the way that you or I can.
Right, because they have a lot of areas that are shared, right?
Yeah. In many cases, for example, if they have communal toilets and all of the workers on the same level of the building have to use the same communal toilet, then how can you try to really prevent transmission between workers from even different rooms on the same level?
Well, Singapore's new cases are in the triple digits these days. A daily high of 447 was confirmed yesterday. But it's important to break down these worrying figures. The Health Ministry reported 38 new local cases in the community yesterday. What does that say about the extent of the community spread?
So we really have three different kinds of cases just now. We've got imported cases, we've got local cases, and we've got the foreign worker cases. So for our imported cases, I think that we're doing a fantastic job with that. We had a big rise around about a month ago, but then we've implemented policies so that they will now be put into quarantine at hotels and so on. And that has the impact that they're effectively dead ends for transmission. So over the last week or so, we've had hardly any infections amongst those. The local cases are those that really is what the circuit breaker measures are targeting. And I think that we're seeing quite reassuring signs from that. The number had been rising quite substantially up until the time of the circuit breaker. And then since then, it has been plateauing and possibly dropping. And so I would hope very much that by the end of the circuit breaker period, that we would have been reduced the number of local cases that are amongst the general population, I think, to quite low levels. So it's really amongst the overall numbers look terrible, and that's because of the infections amongst our migrant workers.
Yes, of course. So, like you said, the number of local cases is plateauing, but of course the cases in the dormitories are rising. So I guess taking both into account, how will that affect the circuit breaker period? Your school's dean, Professor Teo Yik Ying, said that it would be prudent to extend the circuit breaker by 2 weeks. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a question in everyone's mind, right? How long we've got to live circuit breaker. I personally think it's probably a bit too soon to be calling whether we should have an extension or not to the circuit breaking measures. My wish would be that we get down to maybe around about 10 cases or fewer than that amongst local cases per day. Because at that kind of a level, that's the level that the Ministry of Health and the police forces can maintain quite effective social contact tracing. So I think that if we're able to get to that kind of a level by the end of the circuit breaker, then it might make sense to just stop the circuit breaker then. It may rise again thereafter, but I think it's unrealistic to expect that we'll get down to 0 cases by the end of the circuit breaker and then everything will be fine.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Prof, as well as your insight. We've been speaking to Associate Professor Alex Cook from the Swee Hock School of Public Health at NUS.